Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Orange Nerd, where we talk about film, streaming, TV, anything nerdy basically, whether it be Star Wars, Marvel, Indiana Jones, all of that good stuff. So today I brought on my two good friends, Disney Family Man 23 and Mr. Vash Sky. So Vash Sky, welcome back. Welcome back.
Hello there. Good to be back. I'm geared up. I'm ready to go. Let's go.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Tell everybody at home where they can find you on social media.
Best place to find me is at Vash Sky. Title's right there. And to watch me, well, I'm on your channel. I'm at Freshly Squeezed, your source for fresh and juicy info squeezed right from the Grove. So that's the best place to watch me. Best place to find me. You got it.
Perfect. Thank you, brother. And Disney Family Man 23, where can they find you on social media?
Well, isn't that a tagline for a t-shirt? That was awesome. Well, again, I'm Disney Family Man 23, right? Oh, there I am. Right there. That you can find me on Facebook, excuse me, folks, at George Falcione. Also on Twitter, at Disney George. You could also find me and my other co-hosts at the Grand Circle Tour podcast, and then my Disney Family Man channel on YouTube.
Perfect. So, fellas, let's dive right in. Our first topic of the day, the Obi-Wan Kenobi series coming to Disney Plus. So, Ewan McGregor was interviewed recently, and he made a very interesting comment in regards to this new series. And basically what he said was that this Kenobi series is going to feel, quote unquote, more real than the prequels. So Dre, I mean, I know you're a massive Star Wars guy. What are your feelings on these comments? What Ewan McGregor was saying about how the vibe of this show is going to feel a lot more real than it did in the prequels.
I think later on he goes on to say stuff like, he wasn't really a big fan of George's direction, maybe, and writing, saying it's like, well, had a hard time because it wasn't Shakespeare kind of thing. And I think, look, Ian McGregor, I think he is an actual fan of the series, like a lot, but I think he did have problems with how the prequels actually turned out in terms of just their kind of production, because the production of those prequels had so much green screen, so much CGI, and there's this one notable story where he's on he's playing the scene where he's on the planet of Camino, and he's walking down the corridor, and he's looking at the clones down below and so forth. Well, that scene, he is completely by himself in that whole thing, when filming that. It's just blue screen all around him, and he's being yelled at what he's supposed to be looking at. And you have a screen reader on the side there reading the lines, and he has nobody to interact with, nobody to kind of, feed off of for his performance there. And he really had a difficult time. He notes that he had a really difficult time with how that all played out, just in the production. And I don't think he was quite happy with the reception, which is unfortunate, because I actually think they've kind of risen back up, especially because of the Clone Wars. So I think now, what he's saying that they're more real is you have more, kind of physicality, more things you can actually see and interact with as an actor on screen, and a more realistic take on the on the canon, the lore, than the prequels were.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's why I've actually always enjoyed the prequels, but I've seen a lot of criticism of like Hayden Christensen over the years. Oh, he's a terrible actor. Oh my gosh, he's cringy. He's this and that. And look, I've always defended Hayden because I feel like he was kind of handed like a giant lemon when it comes to the prequels. I mean, these really distinguished actors and actresses, even Natalie Portman. I mean, a lot of her stuff was awkward in those prequels, and she's an incredible actress. When you're acting in front of a green screen, there's nothing around you, and the dialogue is George Lucas dialogue, and not, like he said, not exactly Shakespeare. It's difficult. I've seen Hayden in other stuff. He's fantastic, and I just think that he was always I think people were a little hard on him. But George, what are your thoughts on this whole Kenobi series feeling more real, and what Dre touched upon in terms of like the just Ewan McGregor not really feeling too happy with the prequels, how they turned out, the dialogue. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, first off, kind of going off what you said at first with Hayden, speaking on Team Hayden, that a lot of people were saying it was literally like a one-tone, very dry. But I think to that notion, I'm kind of glad Hayden went towards that direction, because it shows the transition from him being as Anakin into Darth Vader. You want to start seeing that kind of like that mysterious type of feel in his dialogue. And I think it was the best approach that Hayden could have gone for, in my opinion. But
yeah,
kind of going what Dre was saying on the Kenobi series, that I don't have a problem with the prequels, but I could definitely see the difference of how you can separate them from the original. And I just think that when you have something so as a cinematic masterpiece like the original Star Wars films, and then you go into prequels and everyone has this sort of this tone of, okay, well, it has to be like this, it has to be like that. And I think for me, when it comes to Hugh McGregor, that, as you were saying, of being in front of a green screen and a blue screen constantly and kind of reacting to nothing there, I think you start to see a lot of his acting being more appreciative when he and Hayden were doing the final battle in Revenge of the Sith.
Oh yeah,
because he had that interaction with an actual person, and that they were training in sword fighting and combat and everything to get those scenes so realistic. So I think that what we could expect from Kenobi is there's going to be a lot more in-depth one-on-one with actual people, where it's going to bring the Kenobi character more out as Hugh McGregor himself than him just standing there basically talking to himself.
Right. And one thing that I think that the sequel trilogy and the originals kind of excelled compared to the prequels was their use of lightsaber fights. And I know some people might disagree with me on this, but I think that the prequels, they overused the lightsaber fights to the point where it's almost become like you kind of almost zoned it out. Everyone had a lightsaber and they were all flipping around and doing their saber stuff. But in the original movies and the sequels, it was used much more sparingly. So when there was a lightsaber fight, it carried more weight to it, in terms of the story. So I think we're going to see a little bit of that with this new Kenobi series. I don't think it's obviously not going to be the prequels where everyone has a lightsaber. The situation in the galaxy is different, right, with the Jedi and everything. But I think you're going to see more weight to those lightsaber battles, which I think is very exciting. What are your thoughts on that, Dre, in terms of the saber fights and the using it more sparingly? And
well, I think if you heard George Lucas talk about it, he was always saying that, hey, this is the era of Jedi. This is the time of the Jedi. And it would make sense that they would use their lightsabers in this kind of way. I do agree with you, though. I mean, it definitely has more impact in the original trilogy, that they kind of used it sparingly, or at least used it in a way that wasn't so formulaic as it kind of got to be in the prequels, if that speaks to your point. I think you have to understand what this series is. Obi-Wan's trying to be covert. He's trying to be kind of low key. I know he kind of busts his saber out in A New Hope, but again, that's kind of when he's making his presence known at that point. But before then, I mean, he's really kind of trying to not bring attention to himself or Luke. So I think it would be appropriate that he not use his saber all the time. That it would be kind of an event. I think that's what you're speaking to, kind of an event in the show. When he uses his lightsaber, it's that's a kind of a big deal. So I think not only do I think it's appropriate, I think it's great.
Yeah, and I think that the only thing I'm kind of concerned about this Kenobi series. Now, first of all, Deborah Chow is the showrunner, I guess, for this new series. And for those of you not familiar with Deborah Chow, she did I think 2 or 3 episodes in The Mandalorian season 1, and every one of her episodes were so badass. I mean, she instantly won over the hearts of the fandom. She's incredible. But one thing that I am concerned about, though, I will say, is I'm concerned about this this fight that Kathleen Kennedy keeps touting, the fight of the century or something between Obi-Wan and Vader. If you're familiar with canon, I mean, this fight really shouldn't be taking place in terms of the timeline. What do you think about that? Does that concern you, Dre, at all? Or
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's supposed to be when I left you, I was but the learner. Now I am the master. So it's like,
right.
Fight of the century. It's like, okay, the fight of the century is. I mean, isn't that a New Hope? Isn't that when these kind of these forces haven't collided since what is it Mustafar? So it's like, what? I don't know. That's weird. That's a strange thing. That's a weird thing to hype up.
And that's what they have to be careful with, because I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to compensate so much with the prequels that there was so much dialogue that by the time it got time at the very end, especially in The Phantom Menace, that at the end they were expecting this climactic battle between the Jedi and Darth Maul, and it lasted what, I don't even know the screen time of that battle. It was kind of pathetic.
Right.
And it was, well, you have to also think too, George Lucas started writing The Phantom Menace alone when Return of the Jedi was ending. That's how long it took for him to write that. And I'm just being sarcastic there. That's how long it feels like he wrote it. But I think as far as with the Kenobi series, that they do have to be careful, because I think that they're trying to, put more action, put more thrill into it, and then have less dialogue, but you have to really be able to tie it in with the other ones.
Right.
And I think it's just one of those things where you just have to be careful.
You have to be careful, and I trust Deborah Chow quite a bit, based on those few episodes she did with the Mandalorian season 1. I think she's incredibly talented, and she clearly understands Star Wars. So I trust her. I'm cautiously optimistic that it will be handled in the right way. I don't know though. I'm still worried about it. We'll see. Maybe it'll be a flashback though. Maybe it won't be.
That's interesting. That's an interesting thing. I mean, well, I think. The way I would integrate, we already know Hayden Christensen's going to be part of the cast. The way I would have integrated is that Hayden Christensen's presence or Darth Vader's presence within Obi-Wan be more kind of inner or more kind of almost spiritual, like he's kind of battling in himself. And that is, it presents itself existentially, but it's actually an internal threat. So, that's the way I would kind of do it. And if we're going along that line, oh, sure, yeah, you could do all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, totally. It's more like you touched upon, Dre, where it's like more like in his head, which would be very interesting. Very interesting.
Oh, absolutely. And he would definitely have thoughts of like, because that was his brother. That was his. I mean, they really did love each other, and that kind of internal conflict, I think, would be really, really fascinating. So
and it's also interesting in all the press releases, and I might be reading too far into this, but on all the press releases, you see it when they announce Hayden. They announced Hayden Christensen as Darth Vader, which is interesting to me because they're not saying he's Anakin Skywalker, at least nothing that I've seen officially. It's always as Darth Vader.
Yeah.
So I wonder if they're going to kind of do the same approach that Filoni did with, I believe it was on Rebels, where I think it was Rebels. Yeah, I think it was Rebels where Ahsoka was fighting Vader and then half of his mask was like ripped off. That was Rebels, right?
Yeah.
Maybe they'll do something like that where he's Vader, but like you can see part of his face or something. Because it would be kind of a waste to bring Hayden back, and then he's in a like a Vader costume. You can't even see him.
So I could see, if we were going along the lines of what I had earlier proposed, which is an internal conflict, I could see that kind of his kind of image or facade that Obi-Wan kind of has in his head be of a Darth Vader as Hayden Christensen than him in a suit, because he doesn't know that he's in the suit.
Right.
He doesn't understand that, that whole kind of thing. So his last memory would be of of kind of the Hayden that he kind of knew before, right?
Right.
And they say Darth Vader because Darth Vader, I mean, literally Anakin died and Darth Vader killed him. You know, that's kind of the lore, and that's why they treat them as two separate characters. And I think that's reflective in that casting sheet.
Interesting. Any Disney Family Man 23, any final opinions or comments on this Kenobi series, and anything about like Ewan McGregor's comments or anything like that?
Yeah, I actually have to agree with Dre. I think if they were to go through that approach of like an internal conflict between Kenobi and Vader, you know, that I really think that if they were to show the depiction of Vader through Kenobi's point of view, so the last that he saw Anakin, he saw Anakin, but he saw the darkness coming within him. So it was almost like that connection, but disconnection. So if they were to go down that route, I think that would be the smartest thing to do, as far as if they were to title Hayden as Darth Vader.
Yeah. Absolutely. I completely agree with both of you. That would absolutely be the right way to go. And I hope that's what they do. I really, really do.
I hope so too. I mean, a personal redemption story of Obi-Wan Kenobi, you know, like this kind of personal loss, regret of maybe his, you know, failings, foibles, and him trying to overcome that throughout the series, I think will be great.
And I think that this was a series in the making that needed to be done, because in the prequels, it's almost like that Hugh McGregor kind of got cheated out of his role, because in the originals, it just made such an impact of the character to then, you know, help Luke on his path to becoming a Jedi. And it's almost like his character kind of went backwards and became a little stale. So it's nice to see that they're starting to kind of beef up the character profile.
I think so.
Absolutely. All right, so that concludes our first segment. Our second segment, we're going to start talking about Bob Iger. Bob Iger was recently interviewed, and he was defending the Walt Disney Company's streaming strategy. You know, their new focus, their new priority on Disney Plus, on streaming. This is a very, very interesting subject. Disney Family Man 23, what are your thoughts on, you know, Bob Iger defending the streaming strategy? Do you agree with the approach? Do you disagree with the approach? What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I do think it's more so that it's catching everyone by surprise, because it's one of those things, because people are just, it's part of human nature that they're so used to saying, oh, this big blockbuster film is going to be released in theaters. We get to go and experience it in the cinema. And I think what the notion is it happened so quickly because of the pandemic, because of the shutdown. But in reality, this is the way that it was going to go no matter what. It just pushed it up closer to the notion of that when something is released, you start streaming it. And I think that right now, with everything starting to slowly open, but in reality, it's not to its 100% capacity, nor will it ever really go back to the norm, that it's just one of those things that I think Disney is protecting itself as a company to say, you know, if you want to see these films, whether it's Premier Access or what have you, or even if they give it to you free, subscribe to our streaming service, because the more people that they get, they're bringing in a revenue. And during the time when all the parks and resorts were closed, that was their main source of income. And I think that's where even Chapek had said, this is the approach that we're going with, that the front runner right now is not the parks, it's the streaming service. But I do know that there are a lot of cast members that work in the animation department, primarily Pixar, that aren't really happy with this, because they want to see their films in theaters the way it was supposed to be. And I believe it was the team of Luca, the new Disney Pixar film that will be released July 18th, that they are kind of bitter about the notion, because not only is it not going into theaters, but they're not even getting a Premier Access. It's going to be free for everyone who has the subscription of Disney Plus, and they're not too happy about it. So in my sense, I could understand where Disney is coming, because they're trying to save their own butts as far as, you know, cost saving, cost cutting, and essentially getting this streaming service up off the ground. Because of what's going on, I can't foresee that just relying on the cinema alone is going to make their money back of how much these movies cost.
Yeah, it's interesting because the Hollywood hasn't really had to go through like a major seismic shift for a very, very, very long time. The music industry kind of went through their seismic shift in the early 2000s with Napster and iTunes and the whole, downloading music thing when it came about, right, in the early 2000s. And they had to kind of evolve and change. But Hollywood largely stayed unchanged for a very, very long time until recently. So I think you're starting to see that metamorphosis, that change happen now, and it's different. It's different. People aren't used to it, but I think for the most part, they're making the right call. I do think streaming is the future. I do think that the movie theater experience is going to not go away, but it will play a lesser role in the future. It'll be a smaller piece of the bigger pie going forward. And but my heart does go out to the Pixar people. I mean, it definitely does. I mean, every Pixar movie so far that's come out since Disney Plus has opened has been free, whether it be Soul, Onward, Luca, but yet Raya the Last Dragon was Premier Access. So it is kind of, I can see why they're kind of feeling a little bit like as a slap in the face. What are your feelings, Dre, on Vashkaya, on this topic of the streaming service and everything? How do you feel that the strategy so far has gone?
I think it's gone better than maybe even they anticipated. I mean, look, we've had this several discussions. Iger wanted to get into this game 10 years ago. I mean, he really wanted it to be where their films are released to the largest slate of distribution possible. Not just with theaters, but also with potentially streaming, but Blu-ray and other methods of portable media. So this has kind of been a long time coming here. I mean, this is what they've wanted to do for a very, very long time, and this, the effects of the pandemic kind of presented itself to be sort of like an opportunity so that they could kind of get the streaming platform that they had launched months before. That's just crazy to think about, and to really be one of those big top tier streaming services that they kind of envisioned before all this. And like George said, it kept them afloat, right? And it's just, listen, this is the way the industry is going. You want to be one of the bigger players. It's supporting your business now. It makes perfect sense to invest in it to the point and to the extent that they have. And to your point, Orange Grove, I mean, one of your last videos talking about this. I mean, yeah, it's an important thing to prioritize at this time because, like you said, I mean, like Roy said, like you brought up there, it fuels all the other departments, including the parts. So it's vitally important. And to your point, on this Pixar thing and how they're kind of not fans of it, I can totally understand. I think they see themselves as producing a premium product, and when you give it out for free, it kind of cheapens it a little bit.
Yeah,
and I can kind of get that sense. And a lot of filmmakers, think of the theater in mind. They don't necessarily think, hey, this is going to be, a 3-4 person family sitting on the couch watching this. There's certain jokes and certain things you do to try to get that create that kind of energy in that theater setting. So I can definitely see where they're coming from. It's kind of interesting.
And even before, to Iger's point of view, the length of determination to get Fox into the Disney canon. I mean, like, he worked his butt off to get Fox, and that acquisition was such a process, I think, longer than any of the other acquisitions, because to my knowledge, when they went for Pixar, it was, okay, they presented it, Disney bought Pixar, Disney bought Marvel, Disney bought Lucasfilm. And it just seemed like we were following this pattern with Fox, but it was like because people were trying to fight for it. And I don't really think people realize that Iger's intention of purchasing Fox was not to have a Macaulay Culkin lookalike greeting guests in the park. It was for the streaming service to have a bigger vision than just more so outside of just Disney animation.
Yeah, and the streaming game is something that there's a window. I believe there's a window where you jump, where you have to jump into it and really cement your place in that streaming war, right? So to speak. And I think that it's smart of Disney that they jumped in now, and that they're cementing their place in that whole industry. Because like right now, I mean, when you look at the streaming landscape, what are you hearing on social media? You hear about Netflix a whole lot. Netflix is doing very well, very relevant still. You hear about Disney Plus, and you hear about HBO Max, right? But you don't
absolutely.
but you don't really hear about like Peacock or like even Paramount Plus coming, all that stuff. And I think it's a detriment to those companies. I think that Disney was smart to really be aggressive in that. This is the future. This is the absolute future of Hollywood. And it's like sink or swim right now. You got to get in while you can. Otherwise, you're going to be left behind.
Well, and Iger, he talks about this. I remember when he was interviewed, he was talking about like, hey, look, I have never been in an industry without change, right? When he started his days as ABC as a weatherman, and then into the kind of echelons of the executive team, with ABC and beyond. His thing was like, these guys had gotten a lot, very complacent. And as he was starting to get up in the ranks, cable television was coming to the fore, and they had to change their content. They had to change their strategy. So Bob Iger is very versed to like, hey, our industry is constantly changing. It's constantly evolving. You can't sit down. You can't sit on your laurels. You have to change with it. Or like you said, it is going to leave you behind, and it's better to be proactive than reactive.
Right. Exactly. Now, George, I have a question for you in terms of like the streaming services in the relation to the movie theaters. And Dre, I'll get to you on this topic too, because I really want to hear your opinion on this as well. But like, George, what are your feelings on the obligation, so to speak, of the studios in relation to like theater chains like AMC? Do the studios have an obligation to keep these studio chains afloat, or is it fair game? It's not friend business, it's show business, and basically, you do what you got to do to survive. And if Disney makes more money on the streaming service because they get 100%, is that fair game? What are your thoughts on that? What are your feelings on that whole scenario?
I think because Disney is fairly new in the sense compared to other streaming services, like Netflix has been around for, how long, and, Disney is still getting its feet wet, where, now these people have to adapt to say, hey, I have to have a mindset that if I'm making a film, it could potentially go just straight on to streaming. And not even with a Premier Access, it could just be free. So it's more so that it's almost like where these, and I might sound a little bit insensitive to this, but it's kind of like where you have to kind of put your pride aside and say, you know what, if this is the passion that you want, regardless if it's in theaters, your film is still getting out to the public. People are still seeing it. It is still being known. And there were a lot of shows and films that did not make the theater, and they're just as important and strong-willed as if it was in the cinema. So I think it's more so it's to the mindset of the animators and the directors and the producers that are on these projects, that now they have to make a mindset of saying that, if you want to get this out, you're lucky and blessed enough to say, hey, I still have my job and I'm still doing what I love to do. And it's like, this is the bigger picture now. Streaming is the top dog of it. And it's like, why not just get it out and say, hey, I was part of this process. I made this film. So I think it's to the notion of theaters are now being what now drive-ins used to be. Like, it was drive-ins was the top thing. And then theaters came and it was, okay, well, no one goes into their convertible anymore, sit outside and watches a movie. Now streaming is the new top dog, and now theaters are what drive-ins were suffering for. And I think it's just, and I think now in the economy today that people are thinking, well, do I spend all this money to go into a theater? pay $10 for a soda and
Right.
but be in the comfort in my own home and really focus on the film. And I think that's the way that the mentality has to be, where, because a lot of times you can get a lot of disruptions in theaters. It can, you want to have that experience to say, but I think it's more so with the animators. I think it's more so that if they have to have it on the streaming service, I think their problem is, why is the Disney animation only getting the premiere access and not ours? I think it's more so of the questioning of why is it. But I think to speaking on their side, I think it's just they want to have the same type of pedestal that Disney animation has right now. And I think if they were to get a little bit of that premiere access, I think they would feel a little better about it. But I guess only time will tell.
Yeah. Well, Dre, what are your feelings on like the obligation or no or lack thereof? To be fair, where do you stand on the studio's relationship with the theater chains? Do the studios have an obligation to make sure that the theater chains stay around, or is it survival of the fittest? If Bob Iger and Chapek can make money on the streaming service, and see you later, movie theaters. What are your thoughts on that? Like in terms of
No, they don't have an obligation. That's the kind of crappy part of this all. I mean, there are windowing practices, right? There are kind of established windowing practices, and theaters are firm. It's like, hey, look, we're at least going to have 4 weeks. A lot of times it was 6 or 8, and that's just kind of going to be how it is, because we need content to be kind of pouring in to keep our kind of situation afloat. And the studios were, obviously they wanted to bypass that system, right? If you could effectively bypass it, then instead of having the split profits 50-50 or 60-40 or whatever the arrangement is, you can keep all that money for yourself, and you can cut down distribution costs and all kinds of stuff. I mean, it really does. What is it? It really does make financial and business sense in that way. But again, it's that right now the theaters kind of lost all of their negotiating power. They kind of they aren't the top dogs that they used to be, and it's made it very, very clear. I mean, you saw the whole Universal AMC thing that happened for a while after Trolls 3 was launched, and how much money that made. And Universal's CEO just came out and said, "Hey, look, we're just going to go ahead and release all of our films exclusively on streaming and theaters." Or I can't forget his correct terminology, but the theater owners were furious, because it's like our complete business, our it's just everything's being bypassed, and it's like, how could you do this? We have we have agreements in place, and it's like, who's going to enforce them? Who's going to hold you to it? Who's going to, I mean, if nobody's going to the theaters, why should I go through you? And it's just, it is a really complex issue. And for every single day that the studios don't get don't get films in theaters, that's one less screen
well, and you also have to consider for how long that theaters have been shut down.
Yeah. Yep.
Really think about the amount of money that even Disney had lost in all areas. Disney, Pixar, Marvel, Lucasfilm, that at the end of the day, they're a business. They have to stay afloat. They have to make money. And sometimes you have to step on some toes in order to do that. It sucks, but it's like, at the end of the day, you have to cover your own butt. And as Dre was saying, that why not take the whole pie and not a piece of it? It's especially nowadays. I think a lot of companies, and not just Disney, are looking at the bigger picture as how to save money, but spend money to make it.
Right.
That's what it boils down to.
Well, and I think the movie going theater experience has changed forever. Like, there's really no reason for a romantic comedy or a movie like The Secret Garden to be in theaters. Yeah, I mean, it's not a big screen sound system kind of experience.
Yeah.
It makes much more sense for, studios like Disney, Warner Brothers, what have you, to release a small movie like Secret Garden or some romantic comedy onto a streaming service than it would be to release that into the theater. So I think going forward, I think the theaters will exist, but it's probably going to be limited to a lot of the big tentpoles. It'll probably be a lot of Star Wars, a lot of Marvel, Avatar, like Godzilla, versus Kong kind of films, DC. That's the future of the theater experience. But these little films that are just like comedies or romantic films or whatever, you don't need to see that in the theater. And it probably will go straight to whatever streaming service is connected to whatever studio is making that movie.
My hopes for the Hot Chick 2 just went right down the drain.
Yes, it did.
Well, this is kind of how it is. but no, I mean, look, you have, and that speaks to the content production side as well. I mean, do you produce those films? I mean, there are films that you produced previously because you just had a gluttony of screens to fill and an audience that could be willing to see those or not. And do you necessarily release those now, or do you even produce those now, based on just the changes in distribution? I mean, it's really profound.
It's hard, and I'm convinced too, and I could be wrong. This is totally my guess, my conjecture, or whatever. But if Disney Plus existed 5 years ago, I think a movie like Solo, a Star Wars story, would have been a series. I don't think they would have put that in theaters. I think the game has changed that drastically since that movie was released. That would have been a series. That would have been like Kenobi, I think.
But kind of going back to the cast members in the animation, I can understand the questioning of it though, because what really depicts a film to say, oh, this film will make premiere access, but this one doesn't?
Right.
What defines that line to say, well, because it kind of makes it look like, oh, this picture is going to be better than this one. Right. It's more of an anticipation of saying how many people would pay money to see Raya and the Last Dragon as opposed to Luca. So pretty much the company saying, oh, people will pay to see Raya, but no one will pay Luca, so let's just throw it on there for free.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what you're seeing is some sort of room full of executives basically making the call. Okay, what we think we can make on this movie versus what we think we can make on it in theaters. They're absolutely doing that. They're absolutely thinking it's not necessarily, maybe not necessarily what movie is better, but what movie is more marketable, what movie can bring us more money, stuff like that. So this one's better for premiere, this one's better for that. It's sad because Pixar does a great product. And
I have to say, watching the trailer, because they just released it, I think it was either a couple of days ago or yesterday for Luca. Yeah. And I have to say, I am very interested to really see this movie because it just looks like a fun, feel-good type of movie. And plus, with it being set in Italy, I'm Italian. So, I mean, what's more better than that? So
there we go. There we go. Like I said in the Annette Funicello video we made, man, here, let's have a cannoli.
Yeah.
I'm only half Italian.
I love Italian food. Let's go. No.
Let's go.
and that's the thing too, right? I mean, you're setting a value statement on product coming out. And, to your point, it's about executives. It's not even about releasing of the film and the film doing well or not good or whatever. It's also about hey, how do we balance this Disney Plus platform that we have? What films do we want to premiere for free that will bump our subscriber count up? So there's a lot of jostling for position and just a lot of bureaucracy. It's the only word I can think of it. Jumbling around these films with these creatives, it's got to be crazy.
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Mm-hmm. I do want to pivot to a completely different, really crazy kind of topic here. So Fox is going to be releasing a new Flintstones series. I believe it's in prime time, called Bedrock. It's going to be an adult comedy, and it takes place 20 years after the original Flintstones series, and it basically revolves around Pebbles, who's now in her 20s. Dre, Vashkai, what are your thoughts on this new Flintstones TV show in the works?
This is definitely a decision. Look, listen. It was a TV show that came out in 1960,
Yeah.
6 seasons, 66. Okay, there have been attempts by studios over the years to try to capitalize on this. Right? I think the most notable one is the 1994, I think, film with that Universal produced a live action starring Rick Moranis and John Goodman and Rosie O'Donnell, interestingly enough. And they spent a whole bunch of money and it flopped real hard. I mean, they spent a lot of money on that film and it just died a dog's death at the box office. I mean, just to put it in perspective, they still have the Flintstones vehicles on the tram route. If you go on the Universal Studio Tour, that's kind of how much they invested in there. That's how much they held on to those props because, oh boy, they were still trying to, make that work, at least in the theme park setting. They did with Waterworld, but not with Flintstones. But anyway, that's a whole other thing. It's just, I've seen, studios and these kind of television networks try to make use of these old properties and with varying degrees of success. Elizabeth Banks, I think, is fine. The film side really like from her are Pitch Perfect, and even then, that's kind of like how much influence did she have? It was Pitch Perfect 2, which she had more influence on, better than Pitch Perfect 1. I don't know. That's for debate. I don't know. It's she tried with Charlie's Angels.
Yeah.
And
I heard that movie did great. It was that was $1 billion movie, right, Dre?
Charlie's Angels?
Yeah, something like that, right? No, I'm kidding.
No, it was not.
No, that was I think that was like one of the biggest flops of the year, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh yeah,
right?
It was not good. So
she took out a loan from James Cameron to make that movie.
Yeah, exactly. Oh boy. So I don't know. I think our track record is and then when, you bring the TV in, you bring Flintstone. I don't know, George. What do you say?
With me, I have an issue when you kind of push so many reboots for every little thing. It's like I'm more of a nostalgic, original, classic type person where it's like you tried it once. You even tried it again with Viva Rock Vegas. It's like, how about we drop it there? It's like, it's just one of those things where it's like trying to find that lightning in a bottle where it's bright and sunny out. There's no lightning. It's like, just let it be. Will I consider maybe checking it out for curiosity purposes and for research purposes for our YouTube channels? Why not? Something to definitely talk about. But it's just one of those things where it's like, okay, they're going to do another reboot of something in a different way. It could be. I'm not going to put any money down on it, but it's just like one of those things that I prefer the classic Flintstones. Now, aside from the 1992 or 1990, I think it was 1994, the Flintstones came out, that I have to say John Goodman alone was a very good Fred. I think like that role. But I mean, as far as I think people just kind of saw it as this Hanna-Barbera classic cartoon from the 60s and the 70s, and they didn't need anything more from it. It's like just that's what it is.
Yeah.
And
well, I think you both are taking reboots for granted. Granted. I'm flopping on my Flintstone jokes, but
well, I mean, from the studio's position,
you don't know what you don't know.
You just don't know what you don't know. So I think it's really important that they kind of kick the tires on this, or rocks. I don't know. Oh boy.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, here's my thing. I think the concept itself is actually pretty smart, because I think that the original Flintstones was sort of a modern, for that era, for the 60s, was a modern take on the caveman world. So it was very relevant to the 60s. I think it was even modeled after the Honeymooners, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And it was like the first cartoon in prime time. It was kind of an edgy thing back then. So I understand why they would try to redo that now in this for this new generation. So the concept itself, I'm not against. And I know that Seth MacFarlane, who does Family Guy, who I love Family Guy. I think Family Guy is absolutely brilliant. It cracks me up like crazy. Wanted to do a Flintstone show like this, and then it ultimately never happened. I would feel more confident in a Seth MacFarlane Bedrock than I do an Elizabeth Banks Bedrock. No offense to Miss Banks. Her films, like Dre touched upon, I don't know. She has.
I could just kind of picture a live action where Seth makes a cameo, even in Elizabeth Banks's version. He just has that Peter Griffin voice, like it's the John of Arcadia.
It has potential. I just wish I kind of wish Seth MacFarlane was kind of running the show, though. To be honest with you, I kind of do. I think that Elizabeth Banks is real iffy, but we'll see. It might be really awesome. It might be really great.
Or it might just hit the rocks.
Right, it might hit rock bottom. Right.
Yeah.
I have a feeling we're going to have executives, just kind of saying their piece later on.
We've made mistakes. I have made mistakes.
That's what's going to happen.
But we own them.
Yeah.
Mistakes are made.
That's mistakes probably are going to be made with this one. I just don't see it go anywhere, fellas. I'm sorry. I think it's, and especially when you hear Elizabeth Banks talk about it, it's like, oh, we're going to reimagine and we're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're going to bring it to take, contemporary audiences. It's like, okay. All right, guys. We'll see.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing too is how much risk are they going to be able to take with a form like a legendary cartoon? Like when Seth MacFarlane did Family Guy, it was an original concept, so he can do whatever he wants. He can make it as vulgar as he wants. He has complete and total freedom with it. But with an IP like the Flintstones, you don't have that same level of creative freedom. So she's marketing it as an adult comedy, but like, how much freedom does she have in that? I'm really doubtful. I don't know.
She must have some big stones to pull this off.
Oh God, the puns. Also too, Seth MacFarlane has complete creative freedom, like with the characters and stuff. So, like, right. Do you do justice with those characters? I mean, if you bring them into the real world, are they? How do modern audiences feel with them? How do you have to change them in order to comport with that? I mean, you just get into some issues, and I just don't think it'll be successful.
For how many adult puns that we just had in this conversation, they could send us a check right now. They could use it in there.
They probably are. Probably are.
That's funny. Yeah, it's. Yeah, I'm iffy on it. I'm very iffy on it. I think the concept has potential, but I just think, I don't know. I can easily see it being a total train wreck too. A complete and total train wreck. So we'll see. But on to our next topic. A little more exciting news. Indiana Jones 5. I really want to get into this topic. There was some casting news. But before we get into the casting news, I want to get Vashka, I want to get your opinion on just your overall feelings on even making it Indy 5. What are your thoughts on this whole sequel situation?
Well, listen, my thoughts on Indiana Jones in general are we're good stuff right there, man. We're good stuff. We're going in, baby. We're gonna do it right this time.
Yes.
I can't wear that. Can't wear the headphones at the same time, guys. I'm sorry. Okay. That's E-Rock for you, by the way. He does an amazing cover.
We can tell that Dre is not excited about it at all.
No, look, listen. I'm excited in this way. There's a chance here to do justice to the character finally. I think a lot of us had some issues with number 4. I think even Harrison Ford had issues with number 4.
Yeah.
And
there was a number 4? You sure there was a number 4?
I know we don't speak of number. I mean, we just refer to it by number and not by name because it's very traumatic as an Indiana Jones fan. But look, listen. You have a chance here to really right some wrongs here. And I think that's why Harrison Ford himself was willing to do it. From what I understand, when J.J. Abrams came up to him and said, hey, look, we're going to be doing what you wanted to do with the ending of Empire Strikes Back, as in kill off the character of Han Solo, finally, and kind of bring those ideas to life, especially with his notion of the character and so forth. And so he did agree on those terms. One of the things that he did say, though, from what I understand, was we have to make an Indiana Jones 5. I'm going to do this. Promise me that we make this movie. And that's why this has gone the way it has so far. At least that's from what I understand. So I think for him too, it was like, I didn't leave the character in a good place. It is a character, from what I understand, that he has a lot of personal, he kind of views that as kind of his franchise, his character, his kind of thing, so he himself is a fan of it. And I think he does want to do justice to the character. So yeah, am I excited on that point? Yes, but I have other issues with it that really, really frighten me, and I'll turn it over to you guys. What do you think?
Well, my main concern. Oh, sorry, Orange Red.
No, go ahead. No, I was actually just going to turn it over to you. So go ahead.
My number one concern with it all is for how long it is taking for the production to actually start on this is for Indy to trade in his whip for a walker. It's like, how much is it going to be to where Harrison himself can have enough screen time to do all these things that he's so used to doing from the 80s. Right. And it's like, is it going to be where it's a storyline where Indy is sort of passing the hat, so to speak? Is it going to be solely on him? Because this is a story that was supposed to be, the film was supposed to be done retrospectively from the time when it was announced. And it just kept on getting delayed and delayed, but they're still moving forward. So, I mean, they must have something in mind where, despite Harrison being of age, that it can still be done. And without Harrison, there is no Indy 5. So I would suggest to the company to start getting stuff rolling pretty quickly.
Well, from what I understand, the release date is July of 2022. So they're shooting for that. I don't know if it'll actually be that. We'll see. But the good news about this movie is the director, in my opinion, is James Mangold, who directed Logan and Ford vs. Ferrari, both movies which I absolutely loved. Actually, I liked Ford vs. Ferrari even more than Logan. But James Mangold has some directing chops. He is very, very good at what he does. So I'm hoping he can churn out a really, really good Indiana Jones movie. The problem with Indiana Jones, like you touched upon, George, is Harrison is like 80 years old. So really, I mean, it's good to have him back, but is he going to be the same? It's just hard. Like, he's 80 years old now,
Here's the thing. I caught him at the when he did his segment at the Oscars, when he did a very funny knock to the Blade Runner. It was very funny, but very well done. But if you actually saw him, and nothing knocking Harrison Ford, because I mean, as you get older, but I'm watching him and the way he's talking and the way he's standing, it's like, can he really do what he did almost like 40 years ago? And it's like, it's concerning me as each day that goes by of how long production is going to be. What is it going to take to say how much of the script is going to have to change in order to accommodate his needs?
I think the best approach for this movie in general is you can't have Indiana Jones this old and pretend like he's the Indiana Jones from the Temple of Doom. Yeah. The character has to acknowledge he's too old for this shit, basically, and kind of go with that route, that approach where you acknowledge, hey, I'm too old for this. My back ain't the same. If you try to cover it up and try to pretend he's the same Indiana Jones that he was in the 80s, it's not going to feel right. He's got to acknowledge it, in my opinion. Another thing too, I want to ask Vash this. What would you think? Because obviously Indy 5 is going to have Harrison Ford. Yeah. What would you think about them rebooting? Because Indiana Jones is a big franchise, a huge franchise, and obviously Harrison can't do this forever. would you be
There-
open to a reboot or passing of the hat, as George was saying, for future indie movies? Or what are your thoughts on that?
There were.
Well, Dre, you have the hat, so
I do have the hat.
There you go. You
Not quite the hat, but I don't know. I kind of want to have Harrison keep that hat, because it's just, listen, the thing about it is there were notions of Indiana Jones becoming, I mean, like its inspiration, James Bond, in that you could have a new Indiana Jones actor play that character in multiple iterations going forward, right? There was an idea of that. I don't know.
Weird.
Because it's so tied to Harrison, and that's the problem. That's why they had a three-way split on Control from Harrison Ford, George Lucas, and Steven Spielberg, because it was just so tied to that actor, tied to that character. I've gone back and forth with it, and I can't see it. I just can't see where it goes beyond Harrison Ford, the through line.
Because wasn't there talks that it was supposed to be Chris Pratt playing a young Indy?
Yeah. I mean, there were concepts for things like that. There were concepts for a wide range of actors to have the fedora be transferred to, and I don't know. It is one of those things. It's like, yes, it is a big franchise. Yes, it is extremely successful. Yes, can you do things with it? Sure. How far do those things go though without Harrison Ford? I think it's a big question mark, and I think there's going to be a range of fans that just don't accept it.
Yeah, and I think that's a big part of why Solo, a Star Wars story, didn't do well, is because they tried to, they recast and look, no disrespect to Alden. I think Alden did the very best that he could, but he just didn't get the same reception as like Ewan McGregor did for Obi-Wan or Donald Glover did for Lando. I mean, he just wasn't. A lot of fans just really weren't buying it. And again, it's not because he's not a great actor. He is. It's just that Harrison Ford, his shoes it's hard to fill those shoes. And I think any actor that tries to replace Harrison in this role is going to have a real problem.
Well, it's interesting because you brought up before in our previous segment where, Solo being on Disney Plus might have worked, right? As a series, you could make an argument. You did have the Young Indiana Jones series that had a modicum of success. I think looked back on now, it's looked on more fondly than when it premiered. You could make an argument for an Alden Ehrenreich figure to take the fedora and play it out as kind of a younger Indiana Jones before the films actually take place through a series platform. That would be something that I would be very much interested in. And for Alden Ehrenreich, it's interesting. I don't know if you got to YouTube and you saw like these kind of face replacements that they do sometimes. And there is one for Solo in various scenes that Alden Ehrenreich plays, and he actually gets the mannerisms pretty good. He doesn't look like Harrison, obviously, but he does get a lot of the affect and a lot of the things very, very well, to the point where when that face replacement does actually take place, it's actually pretty convincing.
Wow.
It's quite stunning. So look, I can kind of see it that way, but as far as a film franchise, I just can't see it, guys.
Yeah.
If you're going to do a number 5, it has to be Harrison or nothing for me.
And that's just it. That's just it. It's the only way you're going to get them in the theaters. And I know Phoebe
Waller-Bridge.
Phoebe Waller-Bridge. I keep forgetting her name. I do apologize. I know she was brought in. She was also brought into the latest James Bond iteration, the 25th Bond. And she was brought in for her screenwriting purposes. And I know there were some controversial changes there. People were suggesting that there might be controversial changes here as well. Interesting, James Bond, Indiana Jones intersecting again. I don't know if that's accurate. I think she is just brought in as an actress. John Williams is coming back though, so that's awesome. We thought we heard the last of him in Rise of Skywalker, so that's great.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up Phoebe Waller-Bridge. She was cast in this as well as Mad Mikkelsen. So they're dipping into that Star Wars talent pool. I mean, these are, Mad Mikkelsen was in Rogue One, and Phoebe Waller-Bridge was the droid in Solo. So that's interesting. Now, I didn't love the droid that she played in Solo. I liked the concept of the droid fighting for droid rights. I loved that concept. I just felt that they kind of beat you over the head a little bit too much with it instead of just kind of showing you that that's what she was doing. It was more spoken. I don't know. It just felt a little too repetitive, but that's not Phoebe's fault. I mean, that's the script and everything like that. I'm not familiar with a lot of her other work. And then Matt Mikkelsen, he's going to be in this movie, which I loved him in Rogue One.
Yeah, that's cool. That's a cool villain. That's awesome. I think that's great.
Yeah, definitely.
So do you think, so this would take place like the 60s, 70s? Is that kind of what we would, approach this thing from?
I think so,
Does
because I
anybody
think
have a suspicion?
that Last Crusade, I'm kind of, if I'm not mistaken, was like the late 30s. I think that the Crystal Skull, if I'm not mistaken, was like the late 50s-ish, right? Wasn't it around there or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought so. I thought
we're
so.
gonna-
I thought it was just kind of like 50s, 60s, kind of just approaching that territory.
Yeah, so if we take that trajectory, I guess we can assume like the fifth one would probably be, like you said, 60s or 70s.
I think so. And then, so would the threat, because I know you had the German people from the 1940s be the threat in the first, two of the first three. Do you think the threat would be the Soviet Union still, or what? How do we think that's going to go there?
That's a tough one. Yeah, probably communism, because that's it. Kind of ties in with the whole that's why we're in Vietnam. I think communism will probably be the big thread for that. I'm assuming.
It's going to be interesting to see how they either approach those issues or bypass them completely.
Hey, Indy fighting for Medicare.
There you go.
Well, that's a pretty contemporary message. That's probably going to be Flintstones, actually. But no, I don't. It's going to be very interesting to see, kind of what they do here. There are areas you can go for sure. It's just, from what I understand, that's kind of why Steven Spielberg left, was just he wasn't completely adamant on the story and the changes that they wanted to make and so forth. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm really torn on this because I want so much. I love Indiana Jones as a character, as an IP. I want to see so much Indiana Jones stuff because I just love that world and that whole archaeology thing, and I just love it. I want to see more of it, but then it's like I don't know if I want to see more of it without Harrison, though. You know?
That's the thing.
That's where the obstacle is, because since he is the front runner to this film, I mean, it's titled Indiana Jones, that it can't be his screen time that he was as Han Solo in The Force Awakens,
right?
Where he had bits and pieces here or there. I mean, he has to carry this film.
And do it at the age that he is, as we all kind of say. Now, look, he's kept his body up specifically for this role, to don the fedora once again. But man, how much gusto does he actually have? How long is the production actually going to be? How physically demanding is the production going to be going forward? Are they going to have to comp in some other actors to play him in certain scenes and stuff? I mean, these are all very, very legitimate questions. It's interesting. There was I lost my train of thought. Hang on. Wait. Yeah. I mean, we're all attracted to the world of Indiana Jones. Like
Right.
the attraction itself is just, it's phenomenal. It's great. It all kind of speaks to the adventure in all of us. And so it's a franchise that people have a very much an emotional attachment to. And with this kind of era of Lucasfilm that we have here, are people going to be a little bit more apprehensive about it, just looking at how they other characters have been treated so thus far? It's very interesting. It's a very, very tricky situation for them.
Yeah, it is. I'm very curious how this turns out. I'm cautiously optimistic just because James Mangold's involved, and I do typically like his work. And I'm hearing that I think Steven Spielberg is like an executive producer, but he's very much involved in this. Even though he's not technically the director, but I do hear he is working with them quite a bit. Yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic, but I'm still worried, though. I am worried, especially after that last one.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, but to be fair, that wasn't Disney though. That was, I think, when 2009. So I don't know. We'll see.
From what I understand, George Lucas kind of pressured the trio to kind of go along, with him on this, and I don't think Steven Spielberg or Harrison Ford were really all that like. It was kind of one of those things. If it's not going to happen now, when is it? It might as well happen with this script, with this story, and it just wasn't there. And I think they all kind of agreed that it wasn't quite up to the indie standards, so to speak. And that's why I think Harrison Ford wants to go ahead and go through with this and kind of redeem the character in his own way. But I don't know, man. It's just you have a lot of things happening all at once, and that's going to leak into the film. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. And then real quick before we go, I'm going to ask both of you guys. I'll start with you, Disney Family Man. Would you prefer a series, an Indiana Jones series, like on Disney Plus, maybe even like a mini series, like a 5 or 6 episode series to continue that Indiana Jones story, or do you like the Indiana Jones movie approach better? What would you prefer if you were in charge?
I think with having Harrison Ford involved, that I would prefer it to be Indiana Jones 5 as a film to kind of wrap everything up as a film series. If they were to take the approach of having a young Indy and have someone like fill in the gaps of where Harrison wasn't, like before Raiders of the Lost Ark, that I would love to see a spin-off series on Disney Plus.
Okay. And Vash Sky, what are your feelings on that? Would you rather have a Disney Plus show, like a mini series, like what they're doing with like Kenobi, or are you happy with just the film? If they're going to do it, what would you prefer?
Yeah, I mean, if there is a life for Indy outside of beyond Harrison Ford, and it's interesting, that was the other thing I was going to bring up, was they circled the tires on doing a kind of a take on Iron Man without Robert Downey Jr. and it just never worked. So it's just some of these characters are just tied to these franchises in kind of inextricable ways, and you can't separate those. So I think for film, I think I'm with George. It's like, hey, look, if you're going to do a film, it's got to be Harrison Ford. If you're going to do a television series, and it maybe they take place either before the films or after the films or whatever, then there are some areas you can go in terms of actors and characterization and storyline and so forth. I think that's a really attractive thing. And I am open to that idea, and it could be great too. You could get the rights for the Young Indiana Jones series, put them on Disney Plus to provide more content that way to get people excited for the kind of would it be like the adult-ish Indiana Jones or something like that, Yeah. So I think there's a way you can go.
Yeah, absolutely. An Indiana Jones show would be pretty cool. Each episode you kind of focus on various adventures, and I think it could be very, very cool on Disney Plus if you do like in a mini series kind of approach, like a young Indy. I would be down for that if they want to extend this franchise out a little bit and do something like that. I don't know. Like I said, I liked Alden and Solo, but I wasn't convinced he just wasn't all the way there. I think I'd probably pick somebody else for that.
I think so. Isn't that kind of an indictment on Solo, though?
It is. That's the thing too.
See, that's the thing
on that, for sure, because you're kind of admitting like, oh, we made a mistake.
Right. If you trusted him for Solo, then why aren't you trusting him to play Indiana Jones? It's very interesting.
It's interesting because this is a guy, a Harrison, who played both characters. And yeah, you're right. Absolutely, Vash. If you do a different actor, it's sort of like admitting like, hey, you know what? We got the wrong guy the last time.
Maybe.
Tough call. Unless they
go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, unless they reboot and they do like a female Indiana Jones or something. I don't know.
You see, that's the thing. That's what people are kind of worried about here. And I have to agree. Female Indiana Jones kind of seems weird. Isn't that just like Tomb Raider, essentially?
I was going to say that. It's like Tomb Raider.
Okay. So even then it's like, it just feels weird. You could do, I mean, here's an option. What if you did like an Indiana Jones series, but from Mutt's perspective, and you recast that character and do something like that on Disney Plus? That could be something. Kind of a series where he's kind of kind of discovering his father's exploits throughout time.
That's interesting. That's kind of reminds me of like how they approached the DC series Gotham, where they took the franchise of Batman, but it was seen through another character, seen through Commissioner Gordon, a young Commissioner Gordon's perspective. That's interesting, Vash. That's very interesting.
You could do stuff. I mean, it's possible.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on. I appreciate you guys talking indie with me, Bob Iger, all this good stuff. I'm gonna start off with Mr. Family Man, where they can find you on social media, and then we'll pivot into Vash Sky. George, where can they find you on social media, my friend?
Absolutely. Well, again, you can find me on YouTube at Disney Family Man 23. You could also find me on Twitter at Disney George, and I'm also part of the podcast, the Grand Circle Tour, and you can listen to it on Apple iTunes, Stitcher, and YouTube.
Perfect. And Mr. Vash Sky, where can they find you on social media?
You can find me at Vash Sky. There we go. At Vash Sky on Twitter. And as far as watching me, I'm on Orange Grove's channel now, so you can find me at our segment Freshly Squeezed, where it's your source for new juicy info, squeeze fresh, right from the Grove. So that's where you can find me there.
Yes, and make sure you check out his first video. It's awesome. Check it out. I'm gonna link it up above. So make sure you check out his first video. He's got more to come as well. But
no one's coming up. It's gonna be good.
Awesome. Thank you both for coming on. I appreciate it. Thank you all for watching. Comment below, like, subscribe, and as always, have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.